And the engineer gave us the nod of approval, and that announces Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives.
I don't think that nod had anything to do with approval, by the by.
Oh.
I think it just was heads up.
Maybe he's asleep. I don't know.
He isn't. He's reserving judgment until 9 o'clock to see whether he approves or not.
Well, there's that to be said. Well, we have two of the three. We have certainly perspectives, and heavens knows we have a great personality of the community with us this morning. And we're going to introduce the gentleman. I'm going to have we have a very formal way here, Father. Really, this is all very scripted. And sometimes Mrs. Busby steps on my toes and reminds me of things. But she does the introduction of the guests and so forth. But we'll start with some kudos. And I guess maybe to be appropriate, Judith K., to have a kudo to Holy Family Parish for the way in which they oversubscribed to their capital fund drive, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about this morning. That's one of the reasons we have Father with us this morning. But I thought that was pretty remarkable, and we're going to discuss that just a little bit. So kudos to Holy Family for that. By the way, kudos to the Neighborhood Watch Association.
Yes, by all means.
Well, it was reported that we had a couple of itinerant day workers in the neighborhood, and that became my duty as captain of the Block Watch Committee by virtue of age, that I check into this, and I find that they are not...
He's the compliance Nazi.
I find they are not itinerant day workers at all. As a matter of fact, they're in here to do a lot of good. They've been imported from Minnesota, Sherry and John Nesseth, and they've done a lot of good in the community, so I'm glad to have them.
Oh, gosh, I am so grateful. I tell you, you know, if you got a good brother, you got a real leg up on life, you know? And my brother and sister-in-law came down from way up north, and my deck was just about to lie down completely in the backyard. Just lie down, put its feet in the air. And they've got that all fixed, and they've been painting ceilings for me. And I am so grateful. I'd just like the world to know that I'm a lucky, lucky person to have a good brother and sister-in-law.
What a blessing. And they've got
what a blessing.
Yes, and they got their green cards. They can stay. So. Well, why don't you introduce our guest this morning?
I'd love to.
We're really happy to have him with us this morning.
I think everybody really knows. He needs no introduction. Father Laible is with Holy Family here, and as it goes, as the years go by, we change our ideas and setups. And so actually you're involved with all of the Catholic parishes, aren't you?
In Logan County, that's correct, Judy. All 4 parishes in Logan County: St. Mary's Atlanta, St. Patrick's Elkhart, St. Thomas in Mount Pulaski, and Holy Family in Lincoln.
That's a busy job. And
yes, it is, but I've got good help, so that makes a difference.
He does that.
And you should say thank you, God, for that.
Yes, I do. I'm very grateful for everyone who helps.
And in your spare time, of course, whenever that rolls around, you've long been in the service.
That's correct. I'm still a chaplain in the Illinois Air National Guard.
Yes, and in the Wounded Warrior Project. And of course, we'd like to talk about your fundraiser that was such a success, but also we do want to talk about this Wounded Warrior Project. I know that you would have some insight into the whys and wherefores. The politicians decided that there'd be no draft, so we have this pool of people who have volunteered.
Correct.
And that's what we have. And I'm afraid that they've, each and every one of them, seen a lot more action than people have in the past. And what kind of toll do you feel it's taking on them?
It's taken a tremendous toll, not only on our troops, but also on their family members, especially with their repeated deployments. It's a challenging life to begin, to begin with, to be in the military, whether it's Guard, Reserve, or even active duty. But especially with the downsizing of the military that we saw in the 1990s, the Guard and Reserve became much more of an operational force. Of course, I'm in the National Guard here in the state of Illinois, And so the traditional weekend warrior concept that was reality for decades is no longer really the reality that we face today. We're much more of an operational force, and so that not only puts a strain on on the guardsmen and their family members, but also think of the strain that it puts on the civilian community as well as your civilian employers, because most of us do have jobs in the civilian world, so we're trying to balance the responsibilities of being gone on a deployment as well as keeping things going, in our civilian jobs as well while we're gone. So there's a lot of different stressors there out there today on the modern warrior.
What is your commitment annually to the reserves? How often are you deployed? You go to Germany a lot, don't you?
Yes, I've been going to Germany once a year for the past maybe 5-6 years. But the commitment is traditionally 1 weekend a month plus 2 weeks during the year. But in reality, especially since 9/11. That has become much more expanded. A lot depends on what your career field is, and whether you're in the service, and whether you're in the Army, National Guard, the Air National Guard, Reserves, or whatever. But let's just say that for most career fields, it's expanded significantly beyond that 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks during the summertime. That concept is kind of gone. At least it's. I don't think it's going to be around anytime soon.
Go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was just saying, while we're that's good. That's good. I do want to get back, perhaps after we take a break. We want to get back to Holy Family, Carol, and your Capitol Drive, because I want to know a little bit more about that and how it inures to the benefit of the community, not just a parochial thing at all. But as I've said to you on a personal basis, Father, this Wounded Warrior Project is really very important to this old guy. When we have wounds that are not visible, the First World War, they had what they called shell shock.
Correct.
And that was the term. They didn't. Whoever heard of PTSD, at that time, and even in our time, the Second War, that term was not used at all. But now the unseen wounds, the mental wounds that are there, are really very significant, and it has an impact on communities. As I said, coming up here this morning, by virtue of the fact that it's a smaller community, we don't have as many numbers of warriors or soldiers, so to speak, involved. So we may not realize the impact that we may have here in this community, the unseen, unknown impact. Do you, as a pastor, do you see any of it directly in our community? And then I'd like to go back to your trips over to Landstuhl and what an important facility that is, not only for the physically wounded, but those who have PTSD. Do you see much of that as a parish priest? The PTSD. We're a small community, so it's not as evident to us.
Well, it is. You're correct. It is a smaller community. Is it out there? Absolutely it is. Has it always been around since we've had the history of war? Certainly. It's just been called something different at different decades and different times in the year, over the years. At one time we described the trauma of war as, when the troops would come back, as a soldier's heart. It's been called different things down through the years. Now we've identified it more specifically with the help of the social services, the psychological services, as post-traumatic stress, and it becomes a disorder when the troop can no longer maintain their what we might consider to be normal daily functions because of the trauma that they're experiencing, through nightmares, flashbacks, just through that trauma of being exposed to the horrors of war, watching their buddies getting blown up and so on and so forth. Is it evident in our community? Anyone who served in a combat zone, whether it be this war or World War II or Vietnam or Korea, has been exposed to war, would most likely understand that it's out there. Sometimes it's just that people don't talk about it. The troops don't necessarily talk about it, but it's out there.
the emotional stress, the PTS.
Post-traumatic stress.
Yes. What was the last letter in that acronym?
Disorder.
PTSD. Stress disorder.
Okay. I'm sorry. At any rate.
That's what this program is sometimes.
Yeah. That is something that you can't see. And historically, we've always thought that anything that was an emotional problem for somebody was probably made up, and we kind of poo-pooed it. Thank God that image has changed over the past few years. But this is an awful thing for the people who experience this. I remember my brother coming home from Vietnam and lived with us. And in the night, he'd be screaming. And I'd have to go into his room and kind of shake him and tell him he was okay, it was okay. And of course, that was before we invented that word and that acronym.
Yeah. Right.
And I knew that he'd seen things that none of us would want to see. But you just don't understand if you've not been there. You know, if you've not walked in those shoes, you really don't quite get it.
I would agree. I would agree with you 100% on that. Very difficult to know what the horrors, the mental anguish that the troops are going through unless you've been there and walked in their shoes or his shoes or her shoes.
Well, the other thing that we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan is the major physical injuries that we have survivors with those major, and they didn't survive in wars past because of the medical techniques and science and how it's progressed and how they've been able to treat people on the battlefield and then evacuate them quickly by air and so forth. So hundreds upon thousands of lives have been saved, but at the same time, some of those lives became a kind of a physical shell. You know, they were very, very grievously wounded, and those are the people that have our undying, of course, any guy that gets a uniform and goes over there has our undying respect. But those people who have that type of grievous injury, that takes a huge toll on them and families.
Oh, it does without question. And in fact, the medical science and technology has improved significantly from the first Gulf War, which was in the early 90s, to the Operation Rocky Freedom and Enduring Freedom in 2003, so much so that I'm told that if an injured warrior is able to receive medical care within the first 15 minutes after being injured, their survival rate is in the 90th percentile. In previous wars, that just would not have happened. So that is what we see coming through the medical facility in Germany after they received their initial medical treatment in the field, and they're stabilized enough to be able to make that 6-7 hour flight from Iraq or Afghanistan to Germany. Those are the troops that we work with in Germany, and the medics do further stabilization in order to bring them across the Atlantic and then back into the different medical facilities here in the United States. But really, hundreds of troops that would never have survived, even in the early 90s, are with us because of the advancement of medical technology as well as the advancement of the medevac air system.
Oh,
you know, Father, how Landstuhl was selected as an intermediate base? Why was that? Geography, ease of flight in from Iraq. Do you know why they selected Landstuhl to serve in that capacity?
The hospital was built after World War II.
The hospital was built thereafter.
Yes, right. After World War II. It's built kind of on that World War II concept where it has 14 wings, 3.8 miles worth of hallways, so it's spread over a large campus. But that particular part of Germany has a significant number of U.S. service members. In fact, it's supposed to be, that area where Landstuhl is at is supposed to be the largest concentration of Americans, service members outside of the United States. So you've got the service members as well as their family members, and then all civilian Department of Defense civilians. And so that was the location that was chosen for whatever reason, and it's been a major medical facility since then. And certainly because of its geographical location, served as a key point for our troops coming in from Iraq and Afghanistan for further medical care.
But by and large, the injured who are flown into Landstuhl are really not there over much of a long period of time. They're treated and worked with there and stabilized, whatever the terms are, and then they're sent back to, well, if they have burns, they're sent back here to Texas to the burns hospitals and so forth. The average stay for a victim, properly chosen word, at Landstuhl would be 5-6 days, or
not even that.
Not even that.
Maybe 3 days at the most.
Really?
Yeah, 3 days. A long stay would be perhaps 7 to 10 days.
Well, if
that
this
would be
place
long.
has 3-point-something miles of
3.8
halls,
miles, correct.
how in the world many wounded warriors are in there at a given time? What is their capacity?
I believe that the capacity can go up to 250 beds if the
That's
operational
a lot.
temperature is really, really high. But then you also have to remember too that they also send all of the outpatients there too. Our troops who need medical care that they cannot receive in a combat zone. So you have outpatients living outside of the hospital complex, and then you've got the inpatients who live in the hospital itself. But navigating that hospital, a lot of our troops will come in and they'll have injuries to their legs.
Sure.
So imagine trying to navigate those hallways if you've got, a leg that's all, you're incapacitated because your left leg is all messed up, or your right leg. Wheelchairs, I might add, are like gold. Trying to find an available wheelchair so that you can get a troop from their barracks, their dorm, to the other side of the hospital. That could be a couple of miles.
Yeah.
Significant amount of walking.
Now, these outpatients that you refer to, are they people who are going to go back to Afghanistan or Iraq?
It depends. I think the goal of the medics is to be able to get them healthy enough so that they can return to duty. And I would say that 99% of the troops that I worked with over the years that I've been going to Landstuhl, they want to go back. They want to go back and finish their mission.
That's an intriguing thing to me, you see. But that's American. That's American youth, and they're pretty doggone. In the first place, they're dedicated because this is they're not conscripted. This is the non-draft.
That's right. They're
military
volunteers.
Force. These are volunteers, and the fact that a guy will get banged to hell and back and want to go back in there again is going to. It's
very inspiring, Bill. I would agree with you.
Yes, it is.
Very inspiring.
Yeah. This is why I am really so intensely interested in this Wounded Warrior Project. I think there's a real need out there.
There is.
We all go about our daily lives and forget to thank God how lucky we are in our individual ways. But we've got some folks, and not just the individuals themselves, make grievous impacts on them. And I think these folks are really entitled to our respect. And now, as you know, one of the things that they're trying to get us to think about is send $19 a month. That's not too much.
No.
And yet...
hardly a tank of gas today, isn't it? For
yes, as a matter of fact, it is.
What's $19
Yeah. Now, having said that, most of us think, well, that's a pretty good idea, but we don't get around to thinking about doing it. And it's kind of like church pledge. Once you think, you better fulfill your work with God. I really like to see. I'd like to use this as a soapbox, Mr. Ash, to have people consider call in 648-5510. They have some comments about the Wounded Warrior Project. And I'd like all of us out there in the Etherland to think in terms of making at least one contribution, if not more. $19. Not how much is that a day? So that's something I'd like to propound to the listeners as a challenge for them. And also, I'd like to suggest that to those with computers, just type in Google Wounded Warrior Project. You'll be amazed at how much you find out up there. I think we better take a station break, Mr. Ash. I suspect we probably ought to do that.